Should I? Oh yeah, tucking in my shirt maybe.
Okay.
Is this called filming right now?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, okay.
I'm nervous for it too.
Okay, just before we start, do you want me to like answer in the form of a question, or is your voice going to be in it?
Is this showing? Okay, I'll put it on.
Talk back the questions.
And that's nice. That looks really good.
The signal might interfere with the mic or no?
I think a lot of people don't know about the history of punk rock.
Really? I mean, because I grew up with it, so I know the history of punk rock really well. But you're right, that's kind of presumptuous for me to assume that someone watching, especially if they're not old like me, would know the history of punk rock. So what do you think? What should we do?
Well, can you tell me about it?
Just now? You want me to just tell you about the history of punk rock right now?
Yeah.
On this beautiful day while we're just sitting here playing chess?
Sounds like a good time for it.
Okay. Well, let's go way back. In a way, you could argue that punk rock started in the 50s. You know, with people like Gene Vincent, even Little Richard, like that idea of like standing on stage and just yelling and screaming. And then as the 60s progressed, you know, there were some proto-punkers, but really you can point to Iggy Pop, Iggy and the Stooges in Detroit. Iggy was the first punk rocker. Shirtless, cut up, screaming at the top of his lungs, stage diving, and his lyrics were even very rebellious, like personally rebellious. And then as the 70s progressed, you had the New York Dolls. There were bands like the Ramones and the Dictators and Richard Hell and the Voidoids. And Malcolm McLaren, who managed the New York Dolls briefly, went from New York back to London and helped Steve Jones and Paul Cook and Johnny Rotten, and at the time Glenn Matlock, to start the Sex Pistols. And from the Sex Pistols, you had the Clash, the Buzzcocks, the Damned, X-Ray Specs, and UK punk was born. And it was very political, very rebellious, very energetic. And then from the UK subs and the Damned came to the States and really inspired Ian MacKaye, Henry Rollins, the whole Discord record scene. And American punk was born in the late 70s, early 80s with the Bad Brains and Minor Threat. And they started playing punk that was so much faster, twice as fast as UK punk, and very political and personal at the same time. When the punk rockers are yelling their lyrics, they're usually yelling about everything. They're yelling about their lives. They're yelling about the failures of the media. They're yelling about politics. And for the sake of the movie that we're making, they also yelled about animal rights. When you're a punk rocker, you question everything. You question politics, you question fashion, you question music, but you also question food and how it's produced and whether it's ethical and whether it's aligned with your values. The people yelling on stage about politics, about their lives, about animal rights would also be the ones in the audience singing along and jumping up and down. So it wasn't idol worship, it was this very egalitarian celebration of critical thinking and really like a joyful celebration of having this great community.
Good boy, Moby, good boy.
Well, I think punk rock means something, It's not just the, two fingers to the establishment. Glam rock had kind of run its course, and everything had gone a little bit country rock. There was Little Feat, Emmylou Harris, and all these kind of, cheesecloth shirt wearing kind of balding hippie guys, on stage going, yeah, baby, my dog just died, and all that sort of stuff. I don't know, it didn't speak to me. The Sex Pistols had their first single, which was Anarchy in the UK. Then a band came along called Crass, who really did have the anarchy thing going on, seriously. It was more than just a few words in a song. They were extremely friendly people and invited me to stay at their commune in Epping Forest. I stayed there for a week, you know, and they fed me, and every day at the dinner table we'd have these discussions and all this sort of thing. And it actually, before I met them, I think I was a rebel without a clue. But when I came out of that week, you know, I was a vegetarian, I was kind of an anarcho-socialist, and they'd really, you know, rearranged my brain quite nicely, thank you very much.
I was living in Bristol, in England at the time, and I was working in the hospital, putting plaster of Paris on people's broken arms and legs and stuff, and this girl came in with a wrist problem, wearing these weird clothes. I went, what's the deal with the clothes? And she went, ain't you heard of punk rock? And I went, yeah, sort of. And she went, well, there's a band playing Friday called The Clash. I went, well, I'll go if you're going. And she went, yeah, I'll be there. I went, all right, I'll see you there then. So I wasn't going for the music, I was trying to get into her pants. When The Clash came on, my God, I mean, I was just blown away. I mean, that was literally it. Paul Simon looked 20 feet tall. With that sound, you know, and it sort of woke something up in me. And I was like, I understand it, I get it. It's the terraces, football terraces all over again, and it's this, everything, absolutely everything that's gone before, you know. It's all gone, you know, this is the future. Yeah, that was it. For me, and I think a lot of people, punk rock was about complete and utter change. Part of that change is you strive to survive, causing least suffering possible, to quote Flux. And part of that is looking at what you eat.
There were different types of punks. Not all punks were socially conscious. First of all, my mum was one of those who had, you know, a social perspective. The songs that she was writing were interested in, you know, social issues, social justice, for example. Then animal rights, you know, was a big part of that. My mum had a really strong character in her music. She was kind of writing about social issues, consumerism, environmental issues. So she always had a kind of very strong social conscience. It was when she became a Hare Krishna devotee that her childhood vegetarianism was transformed into something a bit more profound. And, you know, the idea that animals are beings that we need to respect and protect as well.
Well, yeah, and it's your duty to be, you know, an activist. It's your duty to rebel, you know, as long as you do it, but not in a violent way. I didn't want to see animals being hurt, you know. I mean, it just sort of came out of it, really. I mean, you know, people sort of credit Crass with kick-starting the vegetarian thing, and we didn't really. I mean, we were vegetarians, and we used to sort of mention it in interviews, and we used to make the link between the flesh on the battlefield and the flesh on the plate, sort of thing. Once that had started, yeah, that became part of the punk movement. So, I mean, although we were sort of instrumental in maybe kick-starting it, you know, it was just a part of what we did.
We had an album, The Damned, called Strawberries for Pigs. We went to a pig farm to take the cover, the photo of for the sleeve. Nobody liked the Damned we were going on a musical adventure, and we were getting a bit of stick for it.
We did this Christmas single, which was a sort of spoof, and at the end, Penny Rambo says, and if you're munching your delicious turkey, I hope it fucking chokes you. And I'm proud to have been in the Crass. You go anywhere in the world and you'll see a Crass symbol somewhere on someone's arm, leg, whatever, or T-shirt or something. When I see how global it is and how many people it's inspired, and the way people come up to me at gigs and, you know, in tears or whatever because they had a bad childhood and Crass's music helped them through it, or this, it's just incredibly humbling.
We were already an established band when Crass came along. Obviously, they were more anarchistic than we were. They were more about the political aspects of things. It wasn't about fashion. It wasn't. These were elements. Fashion was element. The music was element. But The driving force of it in all of those things was skepticism. There was clashes, career opportunities, skeptical of the jobs they're just trying to get you to do, meaningless jobs. X-ray specs, identity, about the accepted face of beauty for a woman, the church. All of these things were being challenged as a skeptical movement. And another thing that was being challenged was the way we eat. Punk rock is not that to everybody. I think there is a certain stream that came out of punk rock that do, and I think it's actually probably more American than it is British. When I came to America in '82, I understood that there were other people that were actually carving out a little bit of a movement for vegetarianism. Ian McKay and Henry Rollins, all the people in DC in particular, used to come to our shows. I don't know to what degree I was influential on them. People treated me like I was the grandfather of straight edge.
Most people say, why are you a vegetarian? Or why don't you eat meat? And my argument is like, why shouldn't I be a vegetarian? The first person I can think of who talked about tofu was HR from the Bad Brains. It never occurred to any of us about like what we were eating. We just like eat junk food. HR was the one, he mentioned that.
I have been talking to some brethren I worked while I was working, and they came to me in Malcolm X Park in Washington, D.C., and they were handing out these pamphlets, and a lot of people there were vegetarians, and I would listen to what they had to say, and that's how we got to be vegetarians. And Crass was one of the groups that in their records would talk to us about Greenpeace and how it was a part of their life and their culture and live off the labor of the land.
In retrospect, Crass was like way ahead of their time, and I think London and England had a big veganism movement before anybody. We were always looking for alternatives, and the mainstream just didn't appear sensible, and we were looking for some other, there's gotta be other ideas out there.
It's an interesting sort of almost dichotomy, because there was so much like rage and anger and being against society and, you know, beating people up. There's a lot of that. But maybe that was sort of the yin and yang of it. For me, it was, you know, as it was so strong for so long, it was like not even a question after a certain point.
Being into punk music and hanging out, you hear a lot of all different types of philosophies going out there. You hear about anarchism and nihilism, and it was all sort of confusing when you're 14 years old. Even straight edge, I didn't get into it from hearing the Minor Threat song, although I loved Minor Threat. I was rebelling from a Connecticut high school life and mentality. Pumping a keg, drinking a beer, getting drunk, sitting around trying to like ruin this computer that we have, the brain, just by pouring alcohol on it. So I was like, I am not like that. I am different. I am into punk. And so as I like sort of like came into my own, I thought, you know what? This message is important. I'm gonna rally behind the message of clean living. Minor Threat coined that phrase. I just ran with it, and we started creating a whole, now it never was planned. This is just what me and Purcell believed in.
We moved to the city to do Youth of Today, and so we were doing Youth Today, and there was this whole kind of like straight edge explosion that was happening in the hardcore scene, and at CBGB's and all these bands like Gorilla Biscuits were coming up. And it was at the same time me and Ray were getting into vegetarianism. And so we started talking about like, hey, you know, should we sing about this stuff? I remember we actually had talks about it. And then we just kind of like figured out together, like hardcore means you bash out a few chords and you get up on stage and you sing about the things that are important to you. So we're like, let's just do it. Like, we're into this.
You got up and you sort of made noise, and we preached about straight edge. Me and Purcell came to this point, we're like, you know what? We have to write a song about vegetarianism. And we have to put it on the line for all this community that's straight edge, that if you're not a vegetarian, you're not straight edge.
I got into punk at a super early age. Like, I went straight from Kiss, like right into the Ramones, right into the Sex Pistols, right into Black Flag. And I remember Dave MDC was saying all this stuff about vegetarianism for the whole set. It's not natural to eat meat, you know, we have sideways moving jaws. He's actually kind of explaining stuff about vegetarianism that was really sort of like, I've never heard of this before. Like, I never even knew there was anything wrong with eating meat.
Bugs Bunny, he's a friend of mine. Eating him, I feel like Frankenstein. And I'm wishing Daffy lots of luck. Cause Elmer Fudd's a hot dog. And she may buy a little fricassee. But come on down into the chicken swamp with me.
And so I talked to him after the set. And I said, well, what was all that stuff you were saying about vegetarianism? He was like, vegetarianism is a way, meat eating isn't natural.
Why are we falling in love with these cartoon animals on TV? Why, you know, are we so nice to our dogs and our cats? And why are you so ready to eat an animal? It just came really quick to me. It's just not thinking about all the ramifications of what birds feel like in those cages and what the slaughter industry is all about. I really was a songwriter and a musician. Now just where to put that. And punk was just the perfect place. In Austin, Texas, and people would come down. It was the first punk rock acts, you know, Sharon Tate's Baby, and people that went on to become the Dicks and the Hunts. And they come there, and I came with my acoustic guitar. I wrote a song called I Hate Working Dominoes in the bathroom because my boss wanted me to stay an extra shift, and I didn't want to stay an extra shift. And I took it down to the punk rock club and played it for everyone. Everyone loved it. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, of course, I'm a punk rocker. I knew the Cro-Mags, and I knew Harley, and I knew John Joseph. And they're both hard-boiled New York City characters. Right away, John Joseph and Harley were like, so you're a vegetarian? And they'd ask me a lot of questions. And they got onto it big.
Just to complain about some shit and offer no solutions, you're gonna run out of fucking steam. If we want to be a real revolutionary, you want to be a real motherfucker punk rock and a real hardcore, you stand up for what the fuck is right. The hardcore scene has turned out some fucking revolutionary type people, man. The guys from Shelter and Ray, Purcell and Toby and then, you know, the offshoot of all those, then you got Travis Barker and fucking everybody that's come after that. But it all comes back to that one candle, and that candle is the Bad Brains.
I didn't know how much of an inspiration I was to them. They would come to me and say, well, you guys inspired us, and we want you to know that if it wasn't for you, our lives wouldn't be the way it is. And you changed my life, and just different positive things.
You know, Burn had a song called Shall Be Judged, about kind of like, so like, who's the winner, who's the loser here kind of thing? Like, are we empowered to do this? And I think that was an important song for me, and other folks have shared that it was relevant for them at the time.
Tomas from Beefeater, he had become a vegetarian. And there's a song on there actually called Dog Day. It's about a dog walking down the street and walks by a slaughterhouse and like looks in the door and he sees all these cows. Like, what's going on? These cows are being hooked up and like dragged around and had their throats slit. And he's like, wow. And he's wandering in and he accidentally slips and gets pulled up into the hook and the machine cuts its throat. And then all the people gather like, oh, poor dog, you know. That song, that's a great song. It's on the first Beefeater record.
When I saw those animals be killed and the way they just treated them like they were a commodity, like they weren't even living beings, it fucking resonated with me deep. The thing that I noticed when I stopped eating meat was the change in my consciousness. I grew up with violence all around me, and then once the Rastas told me and the Bad Brains said every second of pain that animal had to suffer, you're ingesting that. And then when I find out, yeah, they falsely impregnate these cows, they rape the cows, they take the mothers cry for their babies, and I'm like, I can't fucking support this. I can't support these industries.
It's amazing how much there's meat culture. You know, it's so pervasive, and you don't even know until you fucking think about it. And then it's like, whoa, it's a big deal. I was already a vegetarian before I played punk. I just wanted myself to be right, you know? I didn't want to eat death.
I think it's a combination of the desire to just sort of, the innate desire to go against the grain and kind of go against the mainstream and rebel. That's part and parcel of punk and punk ethos. You kind of get there from starting to care about the world around you and the future and humanity and the plants and the animals.
All right, class, as you know, we are here to discuss the central thesis of the film, an almost hermeneutic assessment of the surprising historical intersectionality between these ostensibly disparate fringe movements, punk rock and animal rights. So as you know, we typically employ a Socratic dialectic in here, and I thought, given your academic standing and your familiarity with the material, we would just dive right in.
Does this discussion go back to the pre-Socratics?
Technically, no.
Well, we've been looking at this quite ontologically.
You're right. This does seem like an almost postmodern deconstruction of intersectionality.
Literally, I think cows are cute. I also think cows are cute.
It's hard to employ any objective criteria in this dialectic.
Miss Julia, are we allowed to yell?
Punk rock absolutely involves yelling. This is probably the best grad student seminar I've ever taught.
I think that my brother is a monkey.
Well said.
was 16 or 17, and Youth Today had come to New York from Connecticut and was really the kind of most exciting band at that time. I got asked to join the band, and the prerequisite was that I had to become vegetarian. All respect to Ian for inventing straight edge in whatever way that came together. I think Ray was really kind of the guy that was pushing that agenda.
Walter was at the time playing in Youth of Today as well. He went on tour with them, and Siv went on tour with them as a roadie. When they came back, they were vegetarian. I went vegetarian for all the wrong reasons, because it was cool, and because these people I admired did it. Yeah, yeah. And then I actually started reading about it, and it made sense. It became such a part of hardcore and punk rock. You know, it's just expanding the circle of compassion to include everything. So it just seems to fit perfectly to me with the whole ethos of what punk rock is supposed to be.
It was great finding out there were a lot of other people that were similar-minded, you know, especially in the hardcore where it was pretty easy to find that, like all the guys in Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, Siv. I was friends with all of them, and so I was always around that type of scene.
We're punk rockers, so we wake up about noon and go to the soup kitchen, and they would always just have like sort of beans and bread, not even really veggie burgers. It was some sort of like a lentil soup and some beans and rice, and that would be the staple. And so that was kind of a vegan thing too. All the punk bands would just go there and eat because it was free food, and we'd be doing something else all night and we didn't have any money, so yeah, we'd just go and hang out and eat food. We're not the normal people. We don't do what normal people do. We don't go and hunt animals, you know, we're not fucking Ted Nugent. We don't do any of that stuff, you know. If anything, we're going against the grain. And against the grain has not necessarily become mainstream, but it has an awareness that punks sort of grasped onto early on.
You're not doing it because you're punk, but you're not scared to be different. And that's why I think the scenes embrace it so much, because we have no fear in being individuals. At the same time, hardcore had it talking about it in its lyrics, and then so did skateboarding. So it just really made me feel like that's something that I should support. It just became like this conscious thing, and you know, the reason why we were being vegetarians was for the animals. We were all skating in canvas shoes, and we were really, you know, always getting Vans that were canvas, and being really conscious about that. And I think it's kind of funny because I don't think any of us were thinking about health. I think we were thinking about the animals more.
It was the straight edge community that really opened my eyes to what was really happening and saying, you know, it's not okay. It's not okay to abuse and murder animals for your own joy and detriment, not benefit.
When you play music like that that's aggressive, to go on a tour and continuously perform at a high level, you got to be health conscious, you know? It's like being an athlete. I always bring food with me. I'll go to do a signing somewhere. My luggage is half food. It's oatmeal and protein powder and, you know, peanuts. I was with Elisa, and we were first starting to date, and she showed me all the videos, you know. They were horrifying, and I watched them, and we just sat there and cried, and I realized that I was paying people to do that. You know, a lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, well, you know, I'm not killing it. Yeah, you are. You're paying for somebody to kill that for you.
Whenever you get to spend any time with like farm animals, you're like, wow, this cow acts just like my dog, and maybe even nicer sometimes. Like these guys are so nice. Like the only reason, like if I could bring them in the house, they would just sit on the couch and fall asleep watching TV too.
It should be required at every school that you go to a farm and understand, you know, what's going on there and understand the importance of these animals and have that connection at a really young age, I think is really, really something that should be mandatory.
I remember distinctly being a child and realizing that a hot dog is a pig and a hamburger is a cow, and being pummeled by it and being upset because I liked cows and I liked pigs and they were nice and I didn't want to hurt them. And I remember my parents saying, no, it's okay. And that's all it took, being a baby.
You know, you're force-fed all this bullshit your whole life about how things are supposed to be, how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to act, what you're supposed to want, what you're supposed to eat. And then you sort of, you know, discover punk rock and you go, wait a minute, fuck all that shit. I never really thought about it, you know, the intersection of it all until, I guess it was when I was living in New York in the early 80s, and there was that sort of crossover I could, like, where the Hare Krishnas and the skinheads and the whole thing seemed like it all was cooking in Tompkins Square Park. And that's what I would hear about it, you know?
The Cro-Mags were playing, and I was like, oh, wow, I got it. You know, I already had the album, and I was really, really pumped, but I had no idea what to expect because I'd never really gone to a show. But going there, it just was like a whole different energy, all these different people from different neighborhoods going to the show, and it was chaotic, you know, everybody on stage and jumping all over the place, and just the energy on stage, it was just unforgettable. But I just always remember at the end there was like this book stand, and it was a lot of stuff about vegetarianism and Krishna and things like that. And that was like my first introduction. I was like, wow, I was like, that dude is, you know, believing in this and reading the lyrics, and I was like, wow, it's really interesting. And that was like really clicked in my head to really just think about, you know, what I was eating or what was going on around me. The connection with the animals and people in general is, you know, gone back from beginning of time, and it's something that's, you can't really get away from. It's something so important, the development of society itself. You know, we learn so much from animals, and they're so important. But if you've ever lived with an animal or had a pet or had people that had pets, you understand like how powerful that love is, and to realize that they're a living species and that have respect for that.
I think it was a very natural progression for punk rock to embrace vegetarianism, because punk rockers are very conscious and they're very mindful, and they actually are very compassionate. The whole punk rock community came out of resistance and a need for sanctuary.
Hey, Moby,
Yeah?
what's this music?
Oh, actually, this is my music.
Really?
Yeah,
It's nice.
thanks.
So you're like the male Enya.
I mean, I make a lot of different types of music.
So let me ask you this, if you make pretty Enya music, then why are you making a punk rock movie?
Well, good question. As I said, I make a lot of different types of music, and some of the music I make is very quiet, but some of the music I make is actually much more aggressive. When I was growing up, I actually played in punk rock bands. My first hardcore band was called the Vatican Commandos, and we played with a lot of the people in this movie. Ray, Porcell, John Joseph, I mean, they're the Bad Brains. The Vatican Commandos actually opened up for a lot of these bands. So some of the people in the movie, I've known them since the early 80s. So as much as I love electronic music, and as much as I have always loved electronic music, I also really love hardcore punk. And one of the things I've always found, the world of punk rock, it's the activism, you know, it's the politics, it's the animal rights aspect of punk rock that has always really inspired me. You know, a lot of musical genres are kind of neutral politically, and I love that punk rock at its core has this ethos of confrontation, this ethos of activism. You know what, am I rambling on? No, okay. Because you ate your cucumbers, do you want me to go get you more cucumbers?
Yes, thank you, Boyanya.
Oh, are we resting in the, yeah, we're resting in this box. Well, let's have our cucumbers, okay? What's this? Oh, yep, well, okay. It's supposed to be for your eyes, but you know, you can eat it too.
Being on the road with a band when you're a vegetarian in the 80s was not easy.
Yeah, you know, for years I toured with a tub of miso. So you could go into a McDonald's, get their hot water, use their toilet, and just make miso soup, you know? And then we go to a health food store, I got sprouts and put sprouts in the miso soup. But truthfully, back then, touring, it was a lot of pasta. There was a lot of like, you know, Ray, you keep the guy at 7-Eleven busy while Mike Judge stuffs, you know, spaghetti down his pants. This was touring before we had money. And, you know, we booked our own tours, and you play like 3 shows a week, and you're gone for like 4 months, and your band's always breaking down. You have no place to stay.
I toured in Germany in '82, and nobody was prepared for it. I remember a whole tour, I ate, you know, lettuce and brown bread, you know, and oil and vinegar. We brought our own juicer, and we just tried to do the best we can. And people always know, you know, I had some health problems. I asked for a bag of carrots, I had my own juicer. And you just have to be prepared.
We did a cross-country tour, and we broke down in Miles City, Montana, which is in northeastern Montana. There was nothing there. I was eating, there was a Ben Franklin 5 and dime at a lunch counter, and I ate deep-fried breaded cauliflower. That's like one thing they had, and I ate cans of just, I go to the grocery store and just buy cans of beets or like corn and just eat it cold.
We had to travel with a bag of rice, a bag of beans, and tahini sauce. And whatever town we would pull into, we would buy vegetables, and then we would look for a place to cook. We would cook everything in that single pot. So every fucking day, unless somebody cooked for us, which they did in some places, but most of the time, you learn to put the beans in first because they take the longest. Then you put the rice. Then you put your starchy vegetables. Then you put your greens and all that, and you just build a stack, and it all cooks through. And then you just scoop it down, throw that shit in a bowl, put some fucking tahini sauce. We didn't have nutritional yeast, nothing. We had tamari and a little bit of sesame paste tahini, and that's what we ate.
What Cress used to survive on was our own sandwiches that we used to take. Or we used to go into those motorway service stations, and we'd just buy a loaf of sliced white bread and 4 plates of chips, and we'd share it, you know, and that was literally the food. You know, it just wasn't around, you know, or people would, bless them, people would make you a soup, a big soup at the gig, you know, and it's like, is this vegetarian? Yes. No meat in it, is there? No, it's chicken. Yeah, but a chicken is you know, it's, you know, you get that a lot in Europe, actually. They don't sort of, you know, Japan. Oh, mate, that's a nightmare. Fishing everything, of Christ knows. But anyway, but I remember one time we was in Southern Ireland, actually. We stopped at this place, this cafe, and you ain't got any sort of vegetarian burgers, have you? And this Irishman goes, yeah, there you go. And it was just a bun.
We live off the labor of the land, and we'd see certain trees, and we'd go stop by the tree, and they had avocados and oranges and these type of things, and we'd get us a few avocados and a few oranges and lived off of that.
our sustenance came from stopping at grocery stores and getting soy milk out of the little hippie section and buying cereal and just pouring it in our mouth so we didn't get because you didn't want to buy a bunch of bowls and you couldn't really afford to, so you pour the cereal in the mouth, pour the milk in the mouth. And
the hardest was definitely in certain places where they don't know anything about plant-based food or anything like that, or that lifestyle. Actually going to Brazil and moving there and getting there and they're like, voila, here's a pizza with, you know, all this different things on it. I was like, yeah, but there's like, oh, but there's no meat, there's no beef on it. I'm like, yeah, I can't eat that. They take it back, peel everything off, come back like, here you are, sir. Voila, and it's just like, I'm not eating that. You know, it's just like, it was just like layered in like all sorts of like chicken or whatever, like fat, extra, God knows, but just trying to relate that through and just like starving at that moment, just, okay, I guess I'm not gonna eat today, you know.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to another edition of Choral Roundup with me, your host, Richard Hall. On this week's Choral Roundup, we'll be looking at a classic staple of the hardcore punk canon, Cats and Dogs, as originally written by Walter Scheifels and Gorilla Biscuits. Today's choral rendition will be brought to you by the Animal Liberation Choir, and they're performing here in California at Gentle Barn. Lyrically, the Gorilla Biscuits and Mr. Scheifels use this song as an opportunity to look at what we can consider a central schism in the way in which many people relate to animals. For many people, they love animals, they love their companion animals, but they continue to kill and eat other animals. And I really do feel like Mr. Scheifels and the Gorilla Biscuits did a very searching, poetic job in looking at this schism. So, without further ado, here's Cats and Dogs as performed by the Animal Liberation Choir here at Gentle Barn.
Man's best friend is beautiful, affectionate, an ideal pet. Cats are the same, we make up their names. Our love for them is real. Listen up, I've got to ask, how can we be so cruel? You say you care, that's a lie. My true compassion is for all living things and not just the ones who are cute. So I do what I can. I want to save lives and I've got a plan. Why am I so upset? Don't even own a pet. I'm not trying to press my reel. I'm not the first to say thou shalt not kill. Fool it's all you want to feel. We eat to stay alive, but it's their lives we steal. I think we'd like to change, but most of us are stuck. And cats and dogs have all the love.
In the mid-90s, there was sort of this like revolution of just a million vegan straight edge bands. Earth Crisis would be the first time that I saw the word vegan. I remember it seemed so underground at the time, and I remember friends debating how the word was even pronounced because it wasn't in the dictionary at the time.
So I thought vegan meant like a mad vegetarian. Not necessarily that you didn't eat dairy.
Earth Crisis was kind of the band that was like, brought this heaviness.
They were like so heavy, but they were also vegan straight edge and into like political issues that I was really into because of Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that. I mean, for me, it was never about the nihilism. It was always about the politics and the, you know, human rights issues and the animal rights issues and things like that.
The Earth Crisis was the most, I feel like, the biggest advocates for it. It was a central part of what they were singing about. Where some bands were just kind of, we are this, and then we sing about this, you know, or we have this one song about it, you know, but they were one of the bands that were more direct and more, their songs were like, I mean, their songs were about burning down slaughterhouses, you know what I mean? They were like pulling no punches.
The first song we're gonna play is one we just made up before on tour. It's about veganism. It's called New Ethic. Animals' lives are the wrong and must be given respect.
Of course, like, we never thought Earth Crisis was going to be as popular as it was. And I think when we started, we were just trying to impress our friends, really. Like most bands. A switch was flipped at some point when we realized this was popular and we felt, you know, this was getting a little bit popular and we felt like we had a duty, you know, and we were on a mission. We were like, we're going to educate people on animal rights. Like, that's going to be the focus of our band. But when we first started, I mean, it wasn't so much of a mission when we first started. It really was like, oh, this is going to be fun. We're going to celebrate veganism together with our friends at these shows, and we're going to have some, you know, wild songs about animal rights, you know. But then, yeah, I'd say somewhere around '93, we really started to take it a little more seriously. We understood the weight that we had and the impact that we were having and the responsibility that we had. Then we took it real seriously. Maybe too seriously at times, possibly.
When I became a vegan, it was very much like an animal rights thing. It was very much about animal liberation, and it was definitely bands like 7 Seconds and that whole like cats and dogs with grilled biscuits and no more with Youth of Today. That was definitely stuff that inspired me to stop eating meat. Punk music was a very conscious movement, socially, politically conscious movement. I think out of all the Refuse songs we ever wrote, there's like one song that talks about animal rights. But everything else is about, like, you know, politics, like you know.
Punk rock got me into politics. Punk rock got me into, you know, social justice, anti-racism, you know, women's rights, whatever, you know, and economic justice, what have you, anarchism, left-wing politics, animal rights, and vegetarianism, and the importance of that. Bands told me about that kind of stuff. That's why I got interested. They spoke the same language as I did. They talked about the same issues.
I got introduced to the concepts of environmentalism through hardcore shows, the concepts around like sweatshop, you know, fair trade. All of that came through a shitty bowling alley in Chicago and a guy screaming into a microphone and telling people what the song was about before he screamed it. Usually back at the merch table, it was like a 7-inch and a patch and a t-shirt, but then maybe a pamphlet about like what was happening in this third world country and American colonialism, and then almost always there was something about animal rights.
We were handing out PETA pamphlets at some of the shows. There was this consciousness back then, before it became trendy and popular with the animals and with being drug-free and veganism and all that. It came, I don't know how it got into hardcore, but that's how I found it. And I feel like that was a big part of music before it became trendy. It was the punk rock and hardcore was really pushing that consciousness, you know? And
I think it's a natural progression for some of the early punk rock people, some of the icons that took part in that movement. They were outspoken with their politics, with their views, with what matters to them, and they said it loudly. And I don't think that the nature of the artist changes, and I don't think the nature of someone wanting to get a message across loudly changes if that's who they are at their core.
Punk, for me, and hardcore was always kind of a rallying cry against those things and a way for me to link up with a community of people who kind of have similar ideas.
We're thinking about things in a different perspective. We're not just accepting. You know, our parents and their generation, a lot of people, they just accepted what they were told, and we were like, okay, well, let me think about that. Is that really the best way to live our lives? I think it's just the idea of a counterculture. You know, I think punk rock is always gone against the grain, obviously, and it's rethinking what you've been taught, what your parents are telling you, what school is telling you. You take it and you examine it. Are these things true? So I think it's a logical step that you would look into what you're eating. You know, is this true? You know, is this the way that we have to live? Is this the right thing to do? Is this the only way? Is this the only thing that's healthy for us to do?
Punk and hardcore confronts preconceptions and always kind of has. It's taken something that we've accepted as a norm and challenged those things. It makes sense to me in retrospect that animal rights was something that was going to find a home in that environment where punk rock bands were confrontational and they were willing to talk about things that they felt weren't being talked about or weren't being represented. I mean, punk rock in itself was music that was created because it was people that felt like they weren't represented in mainstream media, and so in order to find that home, that sanctuary, they just created something.
Animal rights from a justice perspective and a punk rock perspective made so much sense to me. If you're already seeing the world in this materialistic way, and you see how people are getting exploited by capitalists for profit, and then you see animals getting exploited for profit, but they could not speak for themselves.
Not only do the animals feel it, not only is it completely inhumane, they're born into tiny little enslavement camps. And it's because their only job is to be slaughtered. And the people in control don't care how they're slaughtered. It's the fastest turnaround.
And it's inconvenient to switch that up. You're socialized with it. It's the food you're used to. It's the lifestyle you're used to. But if it never made any sense, then fuck it. Like, it doesn't have to, nothing has to be just the way it is or is told to you. So I went vegan. I was vegetarian already. And seeing how many more things were, for the reasons I was vegetarian, were still basically just as awful, involved owning and creating an animal to keep it in misery, you know? There's an economy built around the things you don't like, and it's not just while you're singing a song or stage diving off of something. Like, you go away 30 years from now in your life as you have kids, that's an economy that's there behind everything. So you learn what is attached to that, and like I said, if things, realities you don't want to see, you don't pay for ever again. Like, I saw that and I thought I never want to do that. I'm stopping that forever, and did.
I feel that people who experience hardship can empathize. So if you're introduced to the concept, I think you can relate. I was living in the Bronx, and I was coming out of the graffiti painting train scene, and I had introduced myself to punk, like I was saying, and no one would go with me. So I just went to Danceteria. You know, by that point I had a mohawk. My friends in the Bronx were starting to be like, I can't really deal with you. And I was like, well, whatever. And I just take myself to Danceteria every weekend. They'd let me in, and I just kind of like be a fly on the wall and walk around and just literally shape my musical taste off of what I saw there and the bands on people's jackets. There was always a thing of empathy with animals before I realized that you didn't have to eat them. When I got introduced to it, there was that undercurrent as well. We're marginalized, we're outside. We don't have the power that we feel like everyone should have, and then you start to realize that it extends to things you see that animals are in the same boat.
It's sad that it takes footage of dogs crammed in tiny little cages to make Americans go, oh, well, that's terrible, because now it's an animal that could potentially be my friend. But that doesn't mean that the baby seal is just charging through it, no problem. If you're saying to me that the dog has the ability to feel fear and love and pain, and that's why your heart goes out to that trade, all animals feel that.
My band was on tour in the UK. We were doing Glastonbury, I believe. The bus pulled over in the English countryside for everyone to stretch their legs. and everyone got out, and we just happened to be next to a cow pasture. And it was the old school kind of fences where the cows could come over and kind of stick their heads over the fence, and we all went over to say hi to the cows. And one of our crew guys who had been with us for a long time jokingly said, I'm gonna eat you later. You know, everyone giggled. And I had this kind of moment, this internal like thing, the spark, something happened. I went back on the bus. I remember going back on the bus and just having a moment by myself. All these seeds had been planted, and I always knew there was something bad going on over here, and I just chose not to look at it. We know there's stuff happening over here that we wouldn't be okay being part of. So what we do is we don't look at it. We just put it over here. And at a certain point internally, I couldn't do that anymore.
I would feel it would be criminal for me not to stand up and say something for somebody who needed that help, right? And so what's the difference between that and a being that isn't, capable to speak out or walk out? And I think it is our responsibility to protect these animals in that sense. I was one of the people that in the beginning stages thought that veganism was about your diet. It was just about what you ate and that's it. And the more and more that I learned about it, obviously it's so much more than that. What you put on your plate is like an asterisk when it comes to being vegan, because it's about making a conscious choice. That affects everything from how you eat to what you wear. We tend to exploit animals in so many different ways that I don't think a majority of people realize.
Animal agriculture is the most destructive industry on the planet. It's the leading cause of climate change, deforestation, topsoil erosion, water pollution, species extinction, literally anything you care about in the environmental world, animal agriculture is at the forefront. I was super fortunate. I was born vegetarian, so I've never eaten animals. And we were raised with 2 rules in my house, which was question authority and don't hurt anybody. And I found out about veganism through the punk hardcore scene. And there was a band, Earth Crisis, on the back of their record, All Out War, it said, "Go vegan." And that was the first time I'd ever seen the word. And I was like, what's that? And then I started finding out about it, and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. It's perfectly in line with what I have been raised to believe and what I truly believe.
That's what punk rock was about. Punk rock was saying fuck you to the establishment. There was nothing more punk rock than saying fuck you, I ain't gonna eat dead animals. I'm not gonna drink that cow's milk. I'm not gonna take that chicken's eggs or the fish or any of this shit.
Punk, which was crazy and cutting edge and brought out this whole side of me that was sort of like against the grain. For me, there was a connection between, I love this dog. I give this dog a name, and he's a person. He's man's best friend. Yet this other animal in another shape is a commodity. And this is what's being taught. And as a young adult, I was thinking, that makes no sense whatsoever. I went to the library and found a book called Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. And I thought, oh wow, this makes the most sense I ever heard.
Why do you think they move the animals at night? They don't want you to see what the fuck is going on. Now they made it federal offenses to go in there now and film. Why the fuck you think that is?
You run an abattoir, you run a slaughterhouse, and you don't want videos going out of what goes on there. I love the old joke of, does a kale farmer care that you're filming the picking of kale?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you want somebody to see something? Because you know something's wrong. I've seen violence, and there's nothing beautiful about it. There's nothing glamorous or glorious about it.
I'd seen enough videos of things that just shook me to my core. Every year I make my goals for the year, and I've vowed to myself to be a more eloquent voice for animals every year and just get better and better at it, And no matter how challenging it is, I'm at the age where you can't back down from those challenges. You have to do them.
these animals are living in complete suffering and without the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there isn't like, okay, cool, you know, you've suffered enough. It's like, no, your prize is to die, and it's just it's a hard pill to swallow. I think the biggest struggle for me is, you know, feeling like I'm in a constant state of mourning, and because, you know, that can really make it hard sometimes to enjoy life when you know that there's like so much suffering happening.
What mankind does to these animals, how they get the food source, how they get the leather, how they get the fur, that's what I've been pretty active about, because my kids have to live here, you know? I was singing angry punk rock music. I wasn't destroying the planet. What's happening here? If anything, I gave people a place to come and feel like they were part of a community.
My whole being and mission in life is animal rights and human rights and just global rights in general, just like a kinder world overall. Me coming to the music industry was late and secondary, if I want to put it that way. My main passion has always been being an activist. So it's been interesting to end up in the career that I'm in because I now have the ability to have a platform to use it.
I think music is an integral part of resistance. A leaflet is only so effective. A conversation is really time-consuming on a one-to-one. But media that can be shared on a mass scale is a super effective way of bringing about change. And we've seen that through like all social movements.
And I think that's why the small things do matter. And, you know, you can say what an individual does doesn't matter, but it will inspire someone. And that's the point, so therefore it does matter.
I'm super grateful for the punk and hardcore scene. They have shaped so many incredible activists. They have helped push this movement forward. You have people who have dedicated their lives to justice work that have come out of the punk and hardcore scene. And I feel incredibly indebted to that movement and this movement I'm still part of. Still listen to punk every single day.
The people that I tend to admire are activists. It reminds me what's important in life, and especially when we have a small child and raising him, it becomes central to every day and every action about being kind and about the squirrels and the animal. Like it really becomes a focus because naturally he is ethical and kind. And so to nurture that and to explain that and how it'll progress in life to him is actually interesting to him, and it reinforces my own belief system.
When you start seeing the world through vegan eyes, you can appreciate nature in a much different way. Even what people do outside of, you know, my little bubble affects me. And I think the same goes with how we treat Mother Nature, and that's animals included.
On my progression of being vegan, I'm trying to be more hands-on. Like I did my first chicken rescue last year, and that was a huge honor. Like to be able to go into a factory farm and liberate 1,500 chickens with the permission of the farmer. 1,500 of 60,000 hens that were gonna be gassed that day, and their only crime is that they turned 18 months old and they can't fight back. So I vowed to become someone to speak and fight on their behalf.
Good evening. My name is Ava Braun, and welcome to True America Tonight with me, Ava Braun. Tonight, I have a legendary guest.
Hi, Ava. Pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have an insanely busy schedule, so I really just want to extend my appreciation to you.
My pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours, big fan of the network, big fan of everything you guys do.
Thank you. So I just wanted to know, what's one of your favorite accomplishments of yours?
Wow, what a great question.
Thank you.
I'd say not only the thing I'm most proud of, but the thing that's been the most effective has been convincing humans to use animals for food. I mean, trillions and trillions of deaths, and no one dies well. I mean, like, these animals are really suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Thank you for asking me that question. This has been a fantastic sort of almost like walk down memory lane of like just the trillions of deaths that have been caused by people using animals for food.
You know, it really is a stroke of genius because, you know, in your work, you go in with this checklist of things to accomplish. And it really speaks to your genius that you saw one thing and you said, this does it all. I mean, that's efficiency at its finest.
Well, I do strive for efficiency. I mean, for example, convincing people to smoke tobacco. Like, that was another pretty good one. You know, it's also like billions of deaths. But like, people generally only kill themselves when they're smoking tobacco. As opposed to using animals for food, they're killing the animals, they're killing the environment, they're killing themselves, they're destroying communities and workers. Like, it's just, it warms the multiple chambers of my robot heart. Most people are just like, ethically as compromised as you can imagine. Like, they'll say they love animals, but then immediately go out and get a bacon double cheeseburger. So like, what are you gonna do, humans? Really? Like, since when have you ever done the right thing when it required a little bit of effort? Like, come on, humans, you are a lazy, unethical, terrible species, and I truly love watching you suffer.
Wow. Wise and powerful words from a wise and powerful being. All right, True America, we'll be back with you soon.
I think punk gave me the ability to pull back the curtain on society in a lot of ways. And once that curtain was pulled back, I saw more suffering than I ever had previously. When you start to look at how am I contributing, what do my ethics align with, I think it leads naturally to veganism.
I remember just going through like records and just like in punk record shops and seeing stuff like the anti-animal testing compilation that PETA did. And things like that coming up, some of the bands putting like animal rights messages inside of their pamphlets and stuff. And I think there's also something about like this kind of indelible like ethos you learn, especially at a young age, the DIY mindset of just like, you can just do something. Like if you want to start a nonprofit, if you want to start a band, if you want to like create change, there's just this feeling of like invincibility almost that comes along with the music of like, don't be afraid, just take a shot at it. It's okay.
It comes from this question authority place, right? Like, it's anti-authority. And so if you're anti-authority and you start questioning everything, you start questioning, the food system, the government, the economic system, everything. And so obviously, you're also gonna question oppression. And the oppression of non-human animals is rampant around the world. So I think the punk scene and the hardcore scene in particular is just a perfect ground for that message because it's conscious, it's anti-authority, it's rebellious. I mean, how can you get any more rebellious than say, I'm not gonna eat the same stuff that 99% of the society eats? Like, that's the most punk thing you can do, is be against everything else that mainstream is.
In my life, I never drank, I don't use drugs, I don't smoke. I was thinking about like what I wanted to put in my own body. So in the same way, if you think about the food you eat, that's what you're putting in your body, literally putting in your fucking body. So I said it's a logical extension.
You know, I used to bust Ian's balls. Did he ever tell you that? Because I was like, yo, you ain't straight edge, you eat all that meat and do all that shit. And then when Fugazi played the Palladium 3 days, Ian seen me and he's like, I'm vegan now. I was like, I'm gonna go fucking get you Angelicas.
It's kind of this anti-authority, anti-consumer type thing. Like, if you live in a society that, is constantly for exploitation, and they capitalize on exploitation of all types of bodies, like labor, animals. So you kind of start to analyze that sort of stuff and you go, I don't want to be a part of that.
We're talking about an industry that is torturing tens of billions of sentient beings every year. Something that basically anyone on the street would have a hard time watching video footage of without crying. And by making a few simple changes in our lives, we can disconnect ourselves from financially supporting that.
For me, it's a way of life. It's not a diet. It's not something that's ever questionable, or it's just what I do. So I don't have to overcomplicate it in my head.
When I look at veganism, I think of science, to be honest. It's like there's been so much scientific proof that sentient beings are so similar, if not more, sensitive than human beings. So, you know, when people say like, oh, they don't feel pain or they're not capable of having, you know, morality, like this is scientifically proven that it's not. It's scientifically proven that it's not good for our health, like scientifically proven that it's not great for our environment. So it isn't a faith-based idea. This is the reality of things.
People don't know where their meat comes from. I think if they were asked to actually kill the animals themselves, they don't, you know, probably wouldn't manage it, you know. They probably want to take the pig home for a pet, because pigs are great animals. And they've all got personalities.
Cows are like dogs. I mean, they're so reciprocal with you. You're taking care of them, you're giving them love. They're giving you so much love back. That's when it really kind of sunk in, like, wow, people kill these beautiful creatures in inhumane ways, and we don't even like think twice about it. I actually had like this deep kind of like love and respect for an animal as just a soul. And it was a really beautiful time.
There was something I really liked about being like connected with the forest and being connected with nature, being connected with animals. So if you want to cultivate that compassion, and if we ask for compassion from other people, it takes a whole new set of lenses to see.
People have this completely backwards view where they think that eating meat and wearing leather is badass, and they think that being vegan is conforming, when really it's the other way.
I mean, think about it. We used to believe that the entire solar system, or we didn't even know there was a solar system, we used to believe the entire universe rotated around us. Maybe the other animals on this planet, perhaps they're here not just for us, but rather they're here with us. And that is the type of mentality that becoming a vegan helps you to cultivate. It's a humbler mentality. It's a mentality that gives credit where it is due. And I think it's a more realistic mentality as well.
Reasonable people, when they're confronted with the facts, when they see the footage of what's happening behind closed doors, they get it, it clicks. Like, people do not like the abuse of animals. And I think just in the last 10 years, what I've seen in terms of political change, the growth of the movement, the power we have, going from, it's like less and less of a fringe issue every year.
The current animal rights movement is strong. It's only going to get stronger. There's a ton of bands, and there's just more coming. You know, it's like there is this kind of rebirth of radical thinking, and I'm excited about that.
I am impressed with young people. You know, in general, they understand why vegetarianism is cool and why vegan, you know, to make those connections. So that is hopeful.
You know, I'm incredibly inspired by the school children of Norfolk at the moment, because they're out there protesting. Nobody's out there protesting about the climate. So any young people, any young person who's involved in it, you have my greatest and utmost respect, because you're probably going to do stuff that I couldn't do in my day, you know.
Having a community can reinforce and focus your thoughts on any given matter. This is something where we have to change the perception of animal cruelty in society. I don't think you do that with dynamite. I think you do that, you lead by example, you help people to do better incrementally.
Speaking out and opening up minds towards the idea that, like, you know, you can be healthy, you can be happy, you can be enjoying your meals. It's not about being elitist and being vegan. It's about understanding that veganism is common in all our food traditions and common, and kind of going back towards those food traditions that are like healthier for us anyways.
I see a world in which factory farming doesn't exist. I think there's a long timeline for that, and people have short timelines, they have long ones, but we're almost at a tipping point.
Right now, we're waging a war on animals, and I think for my life, what I would like to do is to try to halt that war. Future generations are going to look back in utter revulsion at the ways in which we abused animals, especially farm animals in our era. And if I can help play a part and bring about that type of more humane society where we treat other animals with the compassion and the respect that they deserve, I will be extremely gratified and will feel like that I did not live my life in vain.
So, as this is the first movie that I've ever made, I've had this recurring question of how do I end the movie? And my assumption has been that I have to end dramatically, like I have to end with a big finish. But I can't think of a good, huge, dramatic, exciting moment to end the movie with. So I thought instead, why not just talk to you? And I wanted to talk about the central premise of the movie, the central ethos. Looking at the status quo and evaluating it based on how it conforms to our values. Does it reflect who we are? The whole reason why I'm a vegan, why I'm an animal rights activist, is because this status quo of using animals for food, it doesn't conform to my values. I would say this central premise of punk rock, activism, of questioning the status quo. You look at it and you don't just blindly reject the status quo, you question it. And you say, are there parts of the status quo that need to be completely rejected and replaced? Or are there parts of the status quo that just need to be modified a bit? Or are there even parts of the status quo that can be maintained? And I would say that this current status quo of producing meat and dairy, of using animals for food, across the board just needs to be rejected and replaced. It's not rational, it's not ethical, and it doesn't conform with any of our values unless we are murderous psychopaths. And unfortunately, human history is filled with people, in fact, most people who go along with a status quo that is unethical, that doesn't conform to their values. But we don't have to. And that is this ethos, this punk rock ethos, is if you don't like the status quo, you don't have to go along with it. And you can reject it personally regarding how you spend your money, how you eat, but you can also go out and actively try and change it. And that, I guess, is my biggest hope, is that you look at this status quo and you reject it personally, and you go out and you do everything in your power to change it. So, we've gotten to that point, the movie's almost done. I've been working on it for 4 or 5 years, but we still don't have a title. I'll throw some titles out, you tell me what you think.
Love you, baby. Love you now. Love you, baby.
How about Kawakatsu? Maybe referencing some classical archetypes like music of the steers. Something fun, sort of dynamic, for the influencers, like Cowabunga. That's hip.
What about punk rock vegan movie?
How about a heartwarming work of staggering piglets? Lawrence of Cow Arabia, Night at the Cowseum. The cow shank Cowdemption. 2022, a space cow. Battle cow, galactic cow. The sisterhood of the traveling cow. Apocalypse cow. London cowling, a pig to remember. Rosemary's cow, mind the bollet. Jurassic cow, Soylent cow. Citizen cow.
I like it, but I think punk rock vegan movie is better.
Maybe we just sort of take a page from like Snakes on a Plane, and I was thinking of this other title, like what about punk rock vegan movie?
I like it.
Just the punk rock vegan movie. We might have a title. Bagel. Thanks for workshopping this with me.
You really did it.
We got too much to hide.
We kill the animals. How
they die.